For the first question is just really to get your perspective on life generally. What is your position on the right to life? Well established, I realize. And how has that view been shaped over time? And what has been your experience in fighting for the right to life?
Sure. Well, I come at this the question of life from a very different perspective. A lot of people don't know that I'm adopted, and so I recognize, after understanding and appreciating the story of a scared 18-year-old college co-ed at Catholic University in 1958, who had to confront a real dilemma. And that was to pursue a college career and deal with the stigma of having a child or have an abortion. And fortunately for me, she met a nun on her way to have an abortion. And here I am. And so I appreciate very much the story of life and how the book of Deuteronomy says so clearly and so plainly, choose life. That for me, there's never been a question. There's never been a second answer. It has always been one that's been firmly rooted in my own life story, that my mom confronted a real challenge. And so having someone there, just one individual there, to say to her that choosing life is the better path. Choosing life is what God wants for you and this child. Even if this child is not in your life. That to me is a very powerful story, and I think it has been the strength in recent times, especially for the pro-life movement. It certainly has shaped my view on moral issues. I'm a former seminarian and Augustinian monk, and so that has also been part of the foundation for me on the question of life. And I too have had in that capacity, the opportunity to meet individuals who are confronting that challenge, very much like my mother did 52 years ago, and try to help them through it. So that's been, for me, a sense of returning the favor of life, if you will, and it's a very powerful one. Where it gets interesting sometimes is how it gets caught up in politics and how it becomes distorted and it becomes an us versus them, as opposed to an embracing, as I know the Susan B. Anthony organization has tried to, in its long service, to get people to understand what this is about. This is not about the simple legalistic choice. This is about whether or not as a people we will embrace the least among us, the weakest among us. And if we're willing to do that, then the life in the womb, which is the weakest among us, should be embraced as well. So that to me has been kind of a journey story, and it's one that I'm very proud of.
Well, it's beautifully said, and I know our grassroots across the country from NOM and from Susan B. Anthony lists are going to be uplifted by that, and they'll be communicating, I meant to mention, with the voting members on the chairmanship. So thank you. That is a beautiful perspective, and we need it. So thank you. Now, of course, our interview with you is a little different because you've already done this for a couple of years. So you bring a different perspective.
Can you tell? My hair was less gray.
You're smiling. You've got a big smile. So you're doing something well. And I'm sure you've learned a few things along the way because I know that you're the type of person who would. So looking over the past couple of years of having served as chairman and run the RNC, from the perspective of the life issue, is there anything that you would do differently moving forward?
Well, I think probably not too much. If you recognize what has happened, when I became chairman, the party was at one of the lowest points in its history it's ever been at. We had been, to use a word we're all familiar with, shellacked in 2006. And
not shovel-ready.
Well,
not shovel-ready. Yeah.
But we've been shellacked in 2006 and 2008. We lost in a way that was humiliating, quite frankly. A lot of it had to do with the fact that we had stepped away from core principles and values. And as our party platform clearly states, that we are a pro-life party. We value that life. that's in the womb. We value the defense of that life. And we as from a political standpoint, want to be engaged with communities across the country to help people appreciate, again, what that story is about and the legal ramifications and impact, whether it's on healthcare and other issues that these decisions may have on the unborn. So that's where the party has always come from. And as a national chairman, one of the interesting things I found out literally within the first week of my chairmanship was that there is within the party those who do not necessarily support that perspective. And it's always a very delicate balance between those who are pro-choice Republicans versus those who, and I don't like the term versus, and those who are pro-life Republicans. And it is a very delicate balance. But at the core, what motivates and continues to move you forward is the fact that the party has rooted itself in the pro-life cause for good reason, not to the exclusion of anyone, but as a vehicle of explanation, as a vehicle of education, and as a vehicle for political action that I think is very, very important. So I don't see so much of what I would change as much as I have a firm appreciation of that balance. And I know that those who are running for this job, whether now or in the future, will always have to be aware of that balance, not to the detriment or exclusion of any one individual, but understanding that at our baseline, at our foundation, that is something that we've anchored ourselves in our party platform, and we must stay true to that.
Just a quick follow-up. Do you see any areas of where there are resources at the RNC, any areas that could be leveraged into campaigns in the future that we perhaps haven't done in the past?
Well, yeah. Well, I think here again, having gone through two political cycles in 2009 and 2010, and having seen the reaction of grassroots activists, whether they are pro-life or pro, business or whatever their particular motivations happen to be, they generally don't like us to get involved in primaries. They generally like us to stay out of that process. That doesn't mean that we don't support pro-life candidates. That doesn't mean that we don't articulate the pro-life cause. What it means that in a primary situation, you leave it to that community to raise up someone that best reflects those values and those principles. So what we've done as part that's in our rules, and it's nothing that is an individual choice by chairman, is to make sure that that everyone's viewpoints are respected. Certainly, when you get into a general election, those resources must be put to work on behalf of those candidates. We love working with organizations that will allow us to support their candidates, like Susan B. Anthony list candidate. But we have to be very careful from that standpoint that our rules don't allow us to participate in the primary process, but it does require us to be very actively involved and supportive in the general election process. So what we try to do, again, campaign finance laws always in the back of your mind, and lawyers on the other side, to make sure that we respect your boundaries, but also recognize that there will come a point where we can support candidates who stand very strongly for the life issue, and that's what we should do.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. I've just got one more, and I appreciate all that you're putting into this. And it is all the other candidates who have not been have gotten one question, but I'm going to put it a little bit different way because you've served already. Their question was, have you ever given a contribution or bundled candidate contributions through a pro-choice group such as Wish List or Planned Parenthood? This is important to us because part of my inspiration in starting Susan B. Anthony List was putting an engine behind the pro-life perspective. And if a candidate has put an engine behind the pro-choice perspective, it clearly is directly undermining to our grassroots. So my question is, in the last couple of years of being chair and remembering the issue that came up as you were running on the Republican Leadership Council, what are your perspectives now on your involvement there? And just kind of let you explain your thoughts.
On the Republican Leadership Council?
Yeah.
Yes, working with Governor Whitman. Well, she'd asked me as a pro-life Republican to serve with her on that board, and I thought it was important. And again, it goes to my sense of being in the room. How else do you help others appreciate a pro-life perspective? How else do you have that pro-life voice in the room at the table than to be there? And so that it becomes an important, I think, opportunity to express again the relevant importance of the issues that are out there, not just in terms of the economy and war and peace, but most fundamentally on more moral issues like the life issue. And I've always believed in being in the room. I can't have an influence or an impact on decisions. I can't say, well, you know, maybe we shouldn't endorse candidates in a primary, whether they're pro-life or not, because this organization should stay above that. You know, we should give everybody a fair shot at it. But you got to be in the room to make that argument. So I appreciate Governor Whitman giving me the opportunity to be in the room for that conversation for a time and to have a voice there, if you will, that I thought was important at that time. I didn't change my views on the life issue. In fact, it made me appreciate even more the value of the cause for pro-life for the pro-life movement. But again, you know, for me, it was a matter of being in the room and having that voice at the table that otherwise wouldn't have been there. And I just thought, why not? Let's take that moment and serve the year on that board. And again, Governor Whitman's still a friend today, and we have, as they say, a disagreement, if you will, on the issue of life, but we agree on so many other things. And again, that's reflective of our party as a whole. And it helped me in this job find a way to strike that balance with those pro-choice Republicans and pro-choice Republican organizations that have been formed. Because at the end of the day, as national chairman, I have to represent every Republican. I don't get to pick and choose who joins the party. But we do have to stand very firm on those foundational principles as outlined in our platform so people understand that we are the party that believes very firmly in fighting for and defending the right to life. And again, for me, that was a matter of having that voice in the room.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, to follow on a different issue, it's certainly fundamental in the platform that marriage is defined as between one man and one woman. And we've had what is close to a national referendum on this issue as any other, 31 states, all of them deep red states, deep blue states, all of them supporting traditional marriage. But we have a situation, despite the fact that over 80% of Republicans are on the side of traditional marriage, where we have a former chairman of a party, somebody who served in your position, who I respect very much, Ken Melman, but who's been out there making the case publicly about why the Republican Party should back off from its support for traditional marriage. I'm interested in your role, not only as the manager of the party, but as a spokesman for the party, about what you've done and what you plan to do if you continue in the role of chairman to help maintain traditional marriage as part of the Republican brand, if indeed you think it needs to be a key element in the Republican brand.
Well, I think here again is where you find some of that interesting diversity of opinion within the party. Ken, as you know, is a dear friend, and I, respect him and thank him for his leadership of the party. But this is one where we, again, like on the pro-life issue with those who were part of the Whitman team. I have a disagreement. I believe very firmly that marriage is between a man and a woman. I have been very supportive of those efforts in my private life and certainly in my capacity as national chairman. Again, recognizing that others within the party may have a differing view, the party has made very clear where it stands, and that comes through the 168 members who represent the millions of Republicans across the country. So I think part of our responsibility going forward is to work with our leadership, particularly now that we have the House in the United States Congress. We've added seats to the Senate But more importantly, we picked up governorships and state legislative seats around the country to the tune where we flipped now 21 state legislatures from Democrat to Republican. That's where the battle is going to be, my friend. That's where the organization and the strength of the party on this issue is going to have to show itself, standing in relationship and partnership with you and others in the movement to make very clear that this is a line that we want to draw. It is not one that people like to say is anti-gay. Absolutely not. But you can support the institution of marriage between a man and a woman as has been divined, if you will, over time. But doesn't mean that you are, somehow anti anyone or anything. You just feel very strongly about this issue, and that's the fight for us. I think you look at California, for example, that, for all the things people like to say about California, the people have a differing view when it comes to this question, and it's one that is, again, rooted in the traditional view of marriage. So I think that for us, going forward, we'll look to the leadership in Washington, yes, for any legislative or federal efforts to, address the issue of marriage between man and woman, traditional marriage, but most especially at the state level, where I think the battle is really going to be fought over the next couple of years. And we want to be in partnership with our state party, through our state party organizations, working with state legislative leadership to stand firmly and squarely behind the defense of marriage.
I really appreciate your answer, and I think it really speaks well to your belief in the question. But I would disagree on this one point, which is the attack on the very law in California that you mentioned is one of the ways in which this issue is becoming nationalized.
Oh, yeah.
The federal courts are involved. And I'm curious as to specifically, in your role as chairman, the opportunities you get to speak on behalf of marriage, and what opportunities you've taken and what opportunities you would seek out to be able to extend the branding, if you would, of the Republican Party platform's support of marriage out in the public domain.
Well, let me address the first part of that this way. You and I are actually on the same page here. I did not want to give the inference that somehow one side of this fight is less important than the other, or
right,
less effective than the other. You're going to have to come at this from a pincer move from the federal and the state level, because that's exactly how it's being played out nationally. It's not just what we're seeing happening at the state level and the state legislatures, but it's also a national move that's afoot to block attempts, for example, to get the Defense of Marriage Act passed through Congress, or to propose other legislation at the federal level that weakens the efforts by the pro-family movements in state legislatures from being effective. So we're on the same page there. My only point was that really is the front line right now, because that's where we're seeing the battle being won and lost, if you will, on a day-to-day basis. With respect to the job of chairman and seeking out the opportunity to speak, what I do is I always look for an opportunity whenever I'm out there to talk about what we believe in as Republicans, what we're willing to fight for, what we stand for as Republicans. I think that's been part of the reemergence of the party, and the strength of that reemergence, that renaissance, if you will, has come from state party leadership as well as the national leadership, whether it's me and my co-chair, Jan Larimer, and others, going out and speaking about what we believe in. These issues come up. The one thing that I guess I'm noted for is I don't back down from a fight. And in fact, I sometimes kind of crazily run headlong into it. But I believe very, very firmly in what I believe in. And so if you're willing to go out there, as I did when I was a candidate for the lieutenant governorship of Maryland, for the United States Senate of Maryland, and run as a pro-life, pro-family, conservative Republican in a state like Maryland, and win, as I did for lieutenant governor, and lost, as I did for the U.S. Senate, whether you win or lose, the fact is that you're holding on to something and you're fighting for something that you believe in. I'm not saying that, you must believe what I believe, What I'm saying is, I hope you understand what I believe. And in that understanding, you come to appreciate why I believe it. And maybe we can find some common ground so that we can begin to resolve this issue in favor of life, in favor of families, and the pro-family movement. That's my motivation, not just as chairman, but as a private citizen. And I think it's one that in the movement we need to do more of, in going out and not being doctrinaire, but being embracing and showing our heart why we believe so strongly in the value of life in the womb, why we believe so strongly in the value of the family for that life in the womb. And I think that that is the strength that we're going to need going forward in these battles, as we see from the left especially, an assault on life, an assault on marriage, which are the foundations of everything we hold dear as a society.
You gave such a beautiful and moving and very personal explanation of how you came to believe in the life issue, and I've really not given you a chance to explain your core position on marriage and how you approach it. Somebody comes up to you and says, which often is the case, how could you be exclusionary in your definition of marriage? Why don't you want the beauty of marriage to be extended to all people? They come up to you and say, how do you answer something?
Well, I reject the term. I mean, I don't have to accept the term that people want to have that discussion on. You don't start a conversation with me by telling me I'm exclusionary, because then that tells me you're not listening. That tells me then that you've already made up your mind about my position without really knowing what it is. So again, this goes back to the point I just made. How we approach people and how we let others approach us really defines how that debate's going to unfold. So when someone comes to me with that argument, how can you be so exclusionary? I start by saying, well, why don't we have a conversation so you understand, first off, what it is that you're saying I'm excluding and why I'm being exclusionary. But I'm not. You'll understand very clearly where I come from. You understand why I approach this issue the way I do. My household, my father died as a young man from alcoholism. So my family, from a very, very early age, when I was 4 years old, was broken. My father was alcoholic. He was abusive. And I saw what it did to my mother, and I saw what it did to our family over time. So I have this understanding of family and how it is held together and why it's so important. And despite the shortcomings of my father, despite the difficulties and his own personal demons that he had to go through, he was still a very important part of my life. And my mother would share with me that while he may have been difficult with her, he was gentle with me. And he understood, at least through some mechanism in his brain, that this child that he was holding was of some value. And so he would then impart to me certain things and tell me about certain things about himself. So the reality of it is that cohesion is important. It is a grounding force in everyone's life. As a young black male growing up in Washington, D.C. In the 60s, before my mother remarried, without a dad, was difficult. It was very difficult. And so you again begin to form an appreciation of why having that male figure in the family is so important, why this man-woman thing works for kids. And as Lieutenant Governor of Maryland, going to the Baltimore City jail system and standing in a room with 113 to 17-year-old young boys, because there are boys, most of whom did not have a father in their life, did not have that central core definitional family structure in their life. You could see how devastating that could be on them. But you could also see and hear from them how much they want that for themselves down the road, but they don't know how to create that, because society so disrupted them with all kinds of messages that make no sense to them, that we now have, through what you do and what others out there do, have an opportunity to bring some clarity to this discussion about the value of this family, why this male, why this woman, when joined together, have the power through God, I believe, to instill some values, some sense of principle, some foundations in people's lives that will be with them throughout their life. So having come from an experience where that was broken for me, having watched it break for others as an adult, I understand and appreciate, I think, again, from a different perspective, why, the marriage of a man and a woman is so foundational to everything we do in our lives, as children, as young adults, and as senior citizens.
That's very comprehensive, and I really appreciate that. Let me just ask one simple yes/no question.
Sure.
To cap this off. If the federal courts were to strike down the California law and discover a federal right to gay marriage in essence, would you fully stand behind the Republican platform's call for a federal marriage amendment?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, without hesitation or doubt. In fact, we would partner with our leadership in the House and certainly our governors and leadership in state legislatures to create a very, very strong front line, if you will, on that issue. I can't, again, stress how important that is for how we will lead as a people and how we will see ourselves as a nation down the road. And again, it is not to the exclusion of anyone. It is not anti anyone or any group. It is just so fundamental and so foundational that I think that it needs to be protected.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And all the people watching now are wishing, I wish I have some questions I'd love to follow up with. We would be here till after the new year if we entertain that. But what they will do, however, is send their own comments to the folks voting on the chairmanship. So I really appreciate your passion and your time when you want to be with your family now. And thank you so much for joining us this
Well,
week.
thank you. And I wish you all a very, very happy new year. We have a lot of work ahead of us, and we're going to need to stand united and stronger than ever before. This administration, I believe, has put this country on a very dangerous course, from don't ask, don't tell to what we see in healthcare. I think now we're going to have to come together in a way that we probably have never realized before, and I think it's going to be an important time for us.
I couldn't agree more. And we'll get to talk a little bit more about this at the debate on Monday. So we'll see you then.
All righty. Take care now.
God bless.
Thank you so much.